and welcome to this special interview here on Al Arabiya English. I'm Melinda Nucifora. Well, there is no doubt that the world is a very interconnected place and an excellent example of just how important one region can be on the prosperity, stability and the future of another is the guest who's joining me now, Joao Cravinho, the Special Representative from the European Union to the Sahel. Thank you so much for joining us here on Al Arabiya English.
Pleasure, thank you.
The world is interconnected. There are no borders around regions. Why is it so important in this geopolitical climate that the European Union has a presence in the Sahel region?
Well, it's a vast region. We're talking about a region more or less 3/4 of the size of the European Union, with 100 million people, not so far from the European Union, and with vast ungoverned spaces, with vast tracts of territory where you have terrorists, where you have organized crime, where you have enormous socioeconomic difficulties. To have this close to the European Union is, apart from tragic and very difficult for the populations concerned, it's also a danger for Europe. And so what we would like to do, and this is of course not done from one day to the next, it takes considerable time, investment and work. What we would like to do is transform what is now a somewhat desolate panorama into a land of opportunity first and foremost for the people of the region, but also an opportunity for a different kind of relationship between the European Union and an important part of Africa. The challenges of the Sahel are challenges that do not remain in the Sahel. We've seen in other parts of the world, for example in Syria, how, or in Afghanistan, when a terrorist group establishes itself territorially, it doesn't stay where it is. We've seen also how difficulties in terms of socio-economic prospects create, and also in terms of security, create migratory flows which are disturbing for the people themselves first and foremost, but also for neighbors in Africa. The countries of the West African coast have absorbed literally millions of people coming from the Sahel, and also some of them have undertaken this extremely perilous, extremely risky journey across the Sahara and across the Mediterranean or across the open Atlantic into the Canary Islands. People do this at enormous risk, and they do this only because the situation is desperate. And it's exactly that same despair which also leads to the recruitment of terrorist groups, of jihadi groups linked to Al-Qaeda or linked to the Islamic State. So we have a complex of problems, and we need to be able to face up to these issues in a multi-pronged manner, different policy instruments, but above all with a dialogue with those who are in positions of leadership.
It's interesting that you raise the way that you liaise with the region, because it leads me to a question of how do you ensure stability, security, prosperity without encroaching on those echoes of colonial past that obviously still run deep in that part of the world?
Yes, you're absolutely right, and we have to be very clear about this. We can make a contribution, but we do not have primary responsibility. We can only work with those who are in a position of authority to the extent that they are available and open for that. We have no wish whatsoever to impose our views, our perhaps anachronistic understanding from Europe onto what are fast-moving realities in a very young region. We're talking about a region where 70% of the population is 25 or under. People who have completely different prospects and outlooks. And what we want to do is to be able to demonstrate that actually a good, healthy and strong relationship with Europe should be part of a better future for all of them. But we're not in the business of imposing anything at all. That, I think, would be a major mistake.
How receptive has the region been when you consider that it encompasses places like Mali, Burkina Faso, that have experienced coups in recent years, a lot of instability. Are you getting a good response? Is there a willingness to cooperate?
There is a big interest. What they tell me is they want to tourner la page, they want to turn the page. They want to establish a different kind of relationship with Europe, and we're very much available for that. Now, how to do this in a context in which we are not necessarily going to agree on everything, because we don't. We have fundamental differences, but we have to have the maturity to agree to disagree on some aspects, and to identify those areas in which we have mutual interests in working together. And this is the work that we're currently developing, and I've been well received with this proposal, with this general idea.
How much of it is for the mutual benefit of both regions, but also to try and negate the influence of, say, Russia and China, that are also seeing that power vacuum in that region and wanting to exert their influence there as well?
Well, I think Russia and China are different subjects. We should treat them differently. Russia is clearly a nefarious, makes nefarious contributions to the region. Its contributions to stability have been negative. And I think that it is now clear that what Russia had to offer, which is simply brute force in Mali, is not producing the results. Nowadays, the military security situation in Mali is worse than it was when the Russians were invited in to try to reconquer the territory. So the limitations of Russian capacity are quite clear. China has a very different approach, but and it is interested in resources. We see that in Niger it invested a very large amount of money, for $5 billion US dollars, in making the longest pipeline to the coast in Benin. But with China, what I would say is that they have their approach, and we respect sovereign choices of countries of the region. However, I think that what we have to offer is much wider, much more interesting for the populations in the longer term. But this is not necessarily a question of either or. There is nothing impeding countries of the region working with China and working with us as well.
And just finally, when we look at things like crucial raw minerals, the benefits that there are, but also concerns about climate, that leads to a lot of climate migration, is that something that the EU is looking to develop in a sustainable way? How do you encourage that to get the benefits that those obviously very materially rich countries have, but negating the impact that it could have on future climate migration?
Yes, well, I mean, this points to the need that we have as an international community really to develop appropriate governance mechanisms. The climate change is impacting the whole world, but it has a very strong, very powerful impact in the Sahel. It's one of the parts of the world most impacted. This is creating all sorts of changes, elements for change, usually negatively. It is creating, for example, with respect to herders who usually take their cattle from one part of the region to another part, they're forced to find new paths, which are bringing them into conflict with farmers in different regions. And this can also have an ethnic dimension. So here we have climate change producing intensified ethnic conflict. I think that we require an approach that is holistic. You cannot simply apply a one-dimensional formula, military force, for example, and imagine that the problems are going to be solved. That's why I think that the European Union is in a good position to be a good partner for the region, precisely because we do have a multitude of different policy instruments. With respect to critical raw materials, I think that the most important, and I know that the young people of the Sahel feel this very much, is that the wealth that is under their soil should revert to their own futures. And I think that with respect to that, it is necessary to work with the authorities in the different countries in ensuring that appropriate codes of conduct are respected, that there is value added, that there is a return for the populations. And to be honest, I don't see that when you're talking about Russia being a partner for the region, and they're also involved in mining, but in a manner that is not producing any positive results for the population.
It's a really interesting part of the world, and we appreciate you taking the time to share your expertise. Joao Cravinho, thank you for joining us here on Al Arabiya English.
Thank you very much.